Hi, so welcome everybody. We are ITAM Accelerate and we're doing our process videos. So this month's process is the tooling requirements verification process. So this is another one of those sort of semi-governance processes where we're putting in place the operating model. And of course, this month we're talking about tooling. So so what's the first thing? What do we need to do when we're thinking about what tooling we need?
I would say what technology we're measuring as well. I think that's where it starts.
Yeah, so the scope, the asset scope.
The assets, the technology scope, the architecture that we're actually looking to work with.
Yeah.
Network considerations. Again, are we happy to run off agents, or would we prefer to run off agentless? Where are we with the cloud? Has any sort of tooling got that sort of API ability to take in data from, say, AWS, Azure? Does it work with SaaS?
Mm-hmm.
Yada yada yada. The list goes on. That kind of thing. Can we get procurement to plug the contracts database into the SAM suite? That's always a holy of holies for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good starter for 10.
Yeah. So thinking about what we actually need from our tools, so our requirements. Constraints and requirements, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then we need to think about, but I think we also need to think about what assets we're managing, because if we don't have a clear idea of what assets we're managing, we're not going to have an idea of what tooling we need as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's often a gap between the tooling that's in place and what we need to effectively manage our assets. And I think that's a gap that's really big in software asset management. So there might be that expectation that we rely on a configuration management database that's already in place, but actually when you look at what you need to actually do compliance calculations, for instance, doesn't provide the right level of detail, or it doesn't quite provide everything you need to perform compliance calculations. So I think understanding that gap between what, say, a CMDB does today and what you need to effectively manage your assets is a really important thing to identify and communicate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know whether we want to get product specific, but it's another level again when you talk about, say, taking on ServiceNow.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's also, particularly when it comes to something like ServiceNow, where a lot of organisations are implementing it as a suite which manages all of their technology, there's always going to be some give and some take. So certainly with ServiceNow customers that I work with, I know that, ServiceNow's ability to perform software asset management compliance calculations is probably not best in breed.
No.
But the benefits that the organisation accrues from having a really tightly integrated suite that manages the entire technology portfolio means that they're willing to sacrifice some of the functionality around, say, license compliance. So I think that's also something that potentially an asset manager can't do anything about. They just have to suck it up, basically. But they also need to be feeding out to the risk management process, so that senior management can understand that the shortcomings in the tool will potentially impact and cause risk down the line. But as long as that's communicated and those senior management are happy that and understand that trade-off exists, then you're doing the right thing.
And I think too, it's where the business views the importance around IT management as a whole is if the weight leans towards a better CMDB than it does a more compliant IT estate, then that's part of that calculation and risk that they're happy to operate with.
Yeah.
The only caveat I would say to that, of course, is that you need works like ours, like the process kit, to build your workflows between SAM Pro and the core platform of ServiceNow.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest fall downs I see is that the workflows don't ship with the product, and you could beat up ServiceNow for not having that. However, everybody's request process is different, everybody's joiners, movers, leavers is different, change management, release, license compliance process, it will be different. They'll want it customizing, they'll want it tweaking, and ServiceNow would never see daylight, I think, if they tried to encompass every eventuality there. So we'll let them off with that one, I guess.
Yeah. And I guess actually this comes back as well to the constant tension between different approaches to tooling, and it's not just in software asset management, but just it's broadly across all tooling decisions, is some organisations prefer to take a best of breed approach. So what they'll do is they'll buy the best possible tool that they can for any given functionality, and then they will integrate the tools together to produce the workflows. Other organisations will take an approach where they want an integrated suite that will do everything, so they don't have to worry themselves about building out and maintaining those integrations, but recognise that actually, they are sacrificing quality. So it's a really important thing to understand your organisation's approach to its tooling. Does it take a best of breed approach, or does it take an integrated suite approach? And basically running with what you get, running with what that approach means for you. Yeah.
And that goes back to the data flows in the enterprise IT estate.
It does, doesn't it?
Video that we did
absolutely.
previously. So if you want to perhaps a deeper dive on what that means to you and on that particular aspect of this process, dig back into our previous videos. We've done a slide on that, data flows in an enterprise IT estate.
Yeah, and that's available for download as well, for free. Yeah. So we do our tooling gap analysis, and then what do we do?
So after that, it could be that gap that we've acknowledged between where we are technically for any sort of SAM solution that we're designing as to where we are and where we need to be is deemed too great, and therefore we reach out to a SAM supplier to see if they're in a position to step in and either stand up with technology or indeed personnel or resources or intelligence around implementing SAM properly for an organisation.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a service that a lot of SAM service providers can be very useful for, is filling in the gaps in the tool. Although you talk to them and for their perspective it's very frustrating when they don't get necessarily the quality of data they need, but certainly when I've worked with SAM service providers in the past, one of the big things I've needed them to do is fill in some of those gaps for me, because the tooling just hasn't been able to do it for itself. So it's horses for courses, really. But this is also something that I sort of thought, I should have mentioned it in the last video when we talked about skills and competence and training, that actually if you think about it, tooling, partners and your internal people, to a greater or less extent, can trade off against each other. If you have less tool, you might need more partners, or you'll need more people internally. If you have fewer people internally, then you'll need better tooling, and or you might need bigger partners, spend more on your partners. So it's the processes that are stable, because the processes perform the work and they produce the outputs that drive your outcomes. But actually, it's the people, the tools, and the partners that perform the processes, and to a greater or lesser degree, they're interchangeable. So again, thinking about what your organisation's approach is to outsourcing, or what their approach is to buying tools versus, having larger teams internally because they'll do more manually, is a really important thing to understand to help you get that balance right, so that it's a sustainable balance over the long term. Yeah. So totally. Yeah.
So hopefully off the back of that gap analysis, then you can have a dive out and a segue. If, from a procedural point of view, you might want to start creating a business justification for the expense of said tool, if you're going down that route. One thing we haven't actually thought to model in the process, and we'll put that in version 4, is some sort of proof of concept as well.
Yeah.
Because that thing of it's all very well having a salesman in and their promises are PowerPoint thin. It's actually proving it on your IT estate then that offers real value. And interestingly, I was talking to somebody at the BCS Warrington event we had last night, and it was through a proof of concept. He was saying, I can't name names, can't name cat tallies obviously, but the proof of concept highlighted a 7-figure saving in Microsoft alone as part of the proof of concept, and at that point, that's when they got senior management attention as well. So and it was starting to shift that culture then at that point of, if you have something, we'll rubber stamp it and we'll provide it for you. as opposed to, you know, using the request process as a chokehold, and maybe pushing back and saying, you know, have we got it already, or do you really need it? Yeah, it's a cultural war as much as a technical war in that regard. But proof of concept, yeah, we really should have that as a way forward there, I think.
And I guess that was a business case that wrote itself.
Yeah, very.
Yeah. So I guess the other thing is, what do you do if your tooling, if your business justification isn't approved? That leaves you open to risks, and there may be areas of your tooling which just, you know, you have permission refused to buy a new tool or to integrate in a particular way with existing tools. So therefore, there's, you know, part of your assets or part of your estate isn't going to be managed as effectively as it should be. So that's where you need to feed out to your risk management process to make sure that that risk is documented and accepted by the organisation, so that you don't find yourself in trouble later on down the road when something bad happens. So what else? The other thing, of course, is making sure that you can measure the effectiveness of your tool. So you need to make sure that you've got some KPIs around the tool to make sure that it's working properly. And I think the other thing you need to be thinking about is change. So as your estate changes and as you go through the vendor onboarding process and the software approval process, you need to be validating against the new software that's coming through to say, is our current tooling going to be adequate? Do we need to introduce new tooling to ensure that we can manage this new software properly?
Yeah. So. Yeah. And equally, it's always those sort of features, bells and benefits as well that might put one tool ahead by nose than another. So, you know, do you have an ability to support tagging, API management, perhaps SSL management as well? All those little things that might stop you buying another product or opening up another Excel spreadsheet to you know, plough management into over there. You know, what's it like around hardware asset management as well? Is it purely a compliance calculator, or will it do a little bit more for you?
Yeah. So, right, I think that's it really.
Yeah. I think it is. And from there, we hand out to our create and maintain the SAM plan process, because we've acknowledged then that if we don't have the technology in place, we're getting the technology in place and we're moving forward with the plan. So rather to Kylie's point about being able to accommodate new technology, are we also able to keep pace with our ascent of a maturity curve for Samurai ITAM?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and we definitely need to add in something about buying it.
Yeah.
We don't feed out to a contract negotiation process, and we probably should. Anyway, that's it from us.
Version 4. All right.
See you next month. Bye.
Take care.